August 12, 2025, 3:14 a.m. local time. The black waters of the South China Sea mirrored a sky full of silent, watchful stars. Tensions had simmered for months, a low fever threatening to erupt into full-blown conflict. Just 142 nautical miles from Scarborough Shoal, a newly built Chinese coastal base bristled with weapons. Persistent satellite imagery had confirmed it as a formidable anti-access area denial hub. Its crown jewel, the HQ-19 surface-to-air missile system, designed to hunt stealth aircraft. Nearby, the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier maintained a vigilant presence, conducting freedom of navigation patrols. On this night, a lone F-35C Lightning II, callsign Viper 1, cut through the humid darkness. Its mission, to assert international law and monitor emissions from the new base. A simple show of presence, a calculated chess move, a game with impossibly high stakes. But the opponent was about to knock over the board. At 3:16 a.m., the threat board inside Viper 1's cockpit lit up with terrifying clarity. A Chinese phased array radar with a declared range of 300 nautical miles had just gone active. This wasn't a search sweep. It was a hard focus lock, the electronic equivalent of a sniper placing a laser dot on the pilot's chest. For the first time, China's radar had achieved a weapons-grade track on an F-35C, a feat once thought nearly impossible. Inside the Chinese command center, operators resolved the low observable signature into a firing solution. Orders were given. At 3:17:06 a.m., two pillars of fire erupted from the coastal base. Two HQ-19 anti-stealth missiles ignited, accelerating to Mach 14 as they clawed toward the upper atmosphere. Inside Viper 1, alarms screamed. The pilot, a veteran commander with thousands of flight hours, reacted on pure instinct. He yanked the Lightning II into a brutal, high-G evasive turn. Flares and chaff cascade bit into the night as a secondary precaution. At the same time, the jet's advanced electronic warfare suite roared to life, flooding the battle space with countermeasures. Countermeasures flared as the missiles hunted for a lock. The F-35C's shaping and radar-absorbent materials scattered incoming emissions, turning the jet into a ghost the seekers couldn't quite hold. For 1 minute and 54 seconds, pilot and aircraft danced with hypersonic death. The first HQ-19, baffled by the cascade of electronic warfare and the jet's vanishing radar return, overshot and self-detonated harmlessly over the sea. The second missile closed fast, but a last-second barrel roll, pushing the F-35 to its structural limits, forced it to detonate less than a mile away. The shockwave rocked the airframe, violent, terrifying, but non-catastrophic. At 03:19 a.m., Viper 1 steadied. The pilot's heart hammered in his chest. He was alive, but an unprovoked, near-lethal strike on a US aircraft in international airspace had crossed a red line. By 05:12 a.m., Viper 1's encrypted report had reached the Pentagon's highest levels. Analysts called it a technological alarm. The HQ-19 had come dangerously close to scoring the first kill on a fifth-generation fighter. The National Command Authority convened immediately. Retaliation was no longer a debate of if, but how. The directive was clear. The response must be swift, overwhelming, and surgical. The strike's centerpiece were two B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, call signs Death 1 and Death 2, each representing the pinnacle of American air power and valued at roughly $2.1 billion apiece. They would deliver the primary kinetic effects. Supporting them, the USS Ronald Reagan launched a layered escort, 8 FA-18E Super Hornets, tasked with deception roles, a squadron of EA-18G Growlers to provide a dense jamming umbrella, and 2 F-35Cs to escort and conduct real-time battle damage assessment. The plan read like a symphony of modern warfare, stealth, electronic warfare, and precision munitions woven into a single, lethal choreography. The approach began at 06:30 a.m. local time as the strike package eased into position. The first phase was digital, not kinetic. The EA-18G Growlers established standoff orbits, just beyond the engagement envelope of the coastal defenses. At 06:45 a.m., they flipped on their full-spectrum jammers, unleashing a wall of high-power electronic noise designed to blind and confuse Chinese radar networks. Broadband jamming flooded enemy frequencies and severed the data links between radar sites and their command nodes. At the same time, the 8 Super Hornets prepared the grand deception. At 06:48 a.m., each Super Hornet released an ADM-160 MALD-J decoy, miniature air-launched drones programmed to mimic the radar signatures of a variety of US platforms, from fighters to strategic bombers. Within moments, Chinese scopes already reeling under Growler interference lit up with dozens of plausible contacts converging from multiple vectors. Phantom formations maneuvered aggressively across screens, overwhelming operators and collapsing their ability to discriminate real threats from decoys. Faced with a deluge of false targets and broadband noise, the enemy's decision loop stalled. Doctrine and procedure collapsed into confusion. Exactly the window. The strike package needed to move to Phase 2. Precise, surgical strikes against the HQ-19 battery before adjacent defenses could recover. Enemy procedures prioritized high-value emitters, but the deception was complete. They could no longer tell real from fake. The Chinese network froze, paralyzed by false tracks and indecision. Older HQ-9 and HQ-22 launchers began burning expensive missiles on phantom contacts, wasting ordnance on ghosts, while the real attack moved into position. Under that blanket of electronic chaos, the 2 B-2 Spirit bombers slipped through undetected. Their flying wing shape and radar-suppressing materials reduced their return to near nothing, lost in the roar of jammers and the swirl of decoys. Invisible predators, they closed on their objectives with surgical calm. The B-2's APQ-81 radar, running in low probability of intercept modes, cross-checked live feeds against satellite imagery to lock targets with pinpoint certainty. As the B-2s reached release points, the Super Hornets moved to suppress adjacent air defenses. At 06:51, they launched a salvo of AGM-88G anti-radiation missiles, hunters that seek the enemy's own emissions. The primary Chinese phased array, desperately trying to punch through the noise, became a homing beacon. The AGM-88Gs streaked in and struck with brutal efficiency, ripping the radar array into molten ruins and blinding the network in an instant. Seconds later, overhead, the bomb bays of Death 1 and Death 2 opened. Death 1 struck the missile launchers, releasing a string of GBU-31 JDAMs, 2,000-pound precision weapons guided to within meters. Death 2 hit the command node, the hardened shelter and communications hub that coordinated the battery. Explosions blossomed across the base. Antennas sheared off, fuel blazed, and electronics vaporized in a storm of heat and metal. The battlefield went silent, not by accident, but by design. The eyes and voice of that coastal A2AD hub had been surgically removed. The threat that had nearly downed a 5th-generation fighter hours earlier was gone. The hardened command and control bunker and the remaining missile reload facilities were the last to face judgment. The JDAMs fell in silence, arcing along perfect trajectories toward their marks. At 06:52:40 a.m., the first weapon struck. The impact was catastrophic. One of the 3 HQ-19 mobile launchers vanished in a searing flash. Over the next few seconds, a chain of timed detonations tore through the Chinese base. Each JDAM landed with unerring accuracy. The remaining 2 launchers were obliterated, while the bunker, supposedly hardened to withstand attack, was punctured and gutted by a specialized bunker-busting variant. From the first impact to the last, the kinetic phase lasted just 88 seconds. The Chinese defenders never saw the B-2s. They never even knew what hit them. At 06:55 a.m., loitering safely overhead, an F-35C Lightning II executed a high-speed pass. Its advanced sensor suite scanned the target area, relaying high-resolution infrared and electro-optical data back to the USS Ronald Reagan. The verdict was decisive: 100% destruction of all primary targets. 3 HQ-19 launchers, the phased array radar, and the command bunker had been reduced to smoldering craters. Estimated losses for China, between £350 to $400 million in equipment. Losses for the United States: 0 aircraft, 0 personnel. By 07:15 a.m., all US aircraft had cleared the battle space and were en route back to their carrier or home bases. Operation Silent Hammer was complete. The lessons were immediate and would echo in war colleges for decades. First, the operation proved that stealth technology, when integrated with electronic warfare and precision strike, remains the dominant factor in air combat. A platform designed in the 1980s, the B-2 Spirit, had just penetrated the most advanced anti-stealth defenses on Earth. Second, the engagement underscored a crucial truth. Detection is not destruction. China had managed to track an F-35C, but its HQ-19s failed to finish the kill. Against stealth, speed, and advanced countermeasures, even the most sophisticated interceptors were defeated. Finally, the strike was a masterclass in multi-vector warfare. The male DJ decoys sowed confusion, the Growlers blinded defenses, the Super Hornets suppressed enemy radars, and the Spirits delivered the hammer blow. It was seamless integration, air power as a symphony. The message across the Pacific was unmistakable. This was a warning. Any attack on US assets would invite swift, overwhelming consequences. It also reinforced America's commitments to its Pacific allies. US air superiority was not symbolic. It was proven in fire and steel. The 88-second strike had redrawn the map of deterrence in the South China Sea, and it left the world with one haunting question. In an era of hypersonic missiles and anti-stealth radar, does the future of air dominance belong to the platform that cannot be seen, or to the network that cannot be deceived? This is Navy Global. Subscribe for real-time battlefield updates and strategic insights.